We'll wait a few seconds for everybody's connection to. Good morning and welcome to the Flood Risk and Recovery Series brought to you by Louisiana Realtors in conjunction with Fema and the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. Joining us today are Gil Garant, Regional Flood Insurance Liaison for Fema Region 6, Pam Lightfoot, Community Rating System Program Manager for LADOTD Floodplain Office, and Rebecca Dake, Training and Outreach Specialist for Fema Region 6. We are offering this monthly series to provide realtors with helpful information and an opportunity to pose questions regarding flood insurance, disaster preparation and recovery. We hope this will help you in the field as you work with your clients. Today's session is ways to ensure your flood insurance premium is properly rated. Questions can be posed in the chat box. At this time, all participants will be muted to ensure the quality of the presentation. Please check out the remaining topics on our website at www.larealtors.org. Also, as a reminder, Louisiana Realtors has a disaster resources page on our website under the Realtors tab. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Angela. In today's presentation, Gilbert's going to give you a quick overview of NFIP flood insurance rating changes. Then he's going to talk us through a sample, so it will be easier to visualize some of the elements that can cause a premium to go up or down. Gilbert will also show us information that you can check or provide additional information on to ensure your premium is properly rated. Later, Pam is going to tell us more about the community rating system, which can offer structure owners a significant flood insurance discount between 5 and 45%. It's important to keep in mind, though, we are not insurance agents. So while we're happy to answer, the questions and comments that you put into the chat, really looking forward to hearing what you think and what questions you have, you'll definitely need to talk to an insurance agent about your, a specific property or a specific policy. So I'm going to hand it over to Gilbert.
Well, good morning, and thank you for attending this webinar. As I've been told, my name is Gilbert Guidon. I'm the Regional Flood Insurance Liaison for Fema Region 6. My primary roles and responsibility are to interact between our insured customers throughout the Region 6 by answering any questions or concerns they may have when it comes to their flood insurance policy. And that can be the cost of premiums, it could be coverage, it could be denials. I'm the one who helps them resolve these issues. So this morning, I want to talk to you about a few changes that are taking place under what's called Risk Rating 2.0. If you're not aware, FEMA is having a transformational leap forward by implementing what is called Risk Rating 2.0. It's a new methodology of writing flood insurance. The old methodology, what we call the legacy system, has been in use since the late 70s. And while it was sound, it is very confusing, complex, and it's just not sustainable under the amount of current events we have experienced throughout the country, not just in Region 6. But a couple of these things that are changing under Risk Rating 2.0 is, first and foremost, is we won't be going off of the flood zones that we are used to under the legacy system. Instead, we're going to go off of more of an individualized risk assessment for each and every building in FEMA's book of business. We got 5 million policies right now, approximately. So what we mean by individual property risk is that we are going to look at that property specifically and compare it to what perils are out there. There could be perils such as fluvial, which is rainfall. There could be perils such as riverine flooding, coastal storm surge flooding, tsunami flooding, Great Lakes if it applies. So there are new perils that can be added on, and we are going to look at those. We're also going to look at the ground and surrounding elevations. As important it is under the legacy system, elevation of the structure is still going to be important under Risk Rating 2.0. We're also going to be adding on the protected by levies, the aspects of that under a premium calculation worksheet. It's going to locate this structure in what we call the geolocation tool. And then it's going to automatically ping all these data sets. One of those data sets is, where is this location? Is it protected by levee? Is it a barrier island? Is it in a watershed upstream or downstream? All those are going to be answered automatically. We are using, finally getting to the point where we're using industry's best practice. We're catching up to the private sector on using risk-based rates. We are using a series of new catastrophic models. We have created new products such as the first floor height tool, such as the replacement cost value tool, to incorporate data so that way we get the most accurate rate that we have ever been able to provide. And that is one of the reasons we did away with the preferred risk policy, the PRPs. The PRP were policies that a lot of people enjoyed, but they were based just off of a zone. They were not based on actual risks. Now, we say, well, why did it change? Well, we know that a boundary line on a firm is not going to stop the flow of water, yet PRPs were actually rated as they would. They were rated outside of a high risk flood areas with no other variables used to determine their risk. So therefore they received a very low premium, but in reality, we know that that water is not going to stop on that line, and X zones have been increasing in the flood damage for the past 5 years. So we did away with preferred risk rates, and now once again, I'm going to transition to more individualized risk assessment for each building. We provide rates that are easier to understand and for agent policyholders. We did this by removing a lot of the complexity of what was the old system. It was very confusing. The rate schedule that was in the back of the flood insurance manual, I've been in this position for over 3 years, and I still had a hard time finding the exact schedule for that property I was looking for. They had to go off of dates. The original construction date was a pre-firm, was a post-firm. The construction type, the elevation type. There was over 80 different diagrams for foundations. Very confusing. Well, we have streamlined the process of what is risk rating 2.0. We went from 80 diagrams to 6 simple foundation types to ease the complexity and to ease the confusion. We're making the application easier for the agents, less room for mistakes. There was nothing that hurt me more than getting a call from a homeowner who's about ready to close, or I'm sorry, a home buyer who's about ready to close, but because of mistakes by the agents, they were given the wrong quote for flood insurance, and what they thought was going to be a couple $100 a year lands up turning into several $1,000 a year, and it's beyond their means, so they have to cancel their closing. By reducing the complexity, we remove hopefully we remove a lot of these errors before they happen. And once again, we make it easier for the agents. This is really important because agents have to be experienced and knowledgeable in flood insurance, because the better they are, the more they're going to be able to help you if an event happens and you have to submit a claim. I tell people to contact several agents and get multiple quotes, not because they're price shopping, because all prices are based on FEMA guidelines, but because you're looking for that experience, that knowledge base in the agents. The more experienced and knowledgeable they are, the better you are going to have experience. God forbid you should ever have to file a claim. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. So this is a mock-up of what a declaration page should look like. And I do have an actual declaration page I was able to get from one of our insured. We removed all the personal information. But what I want to bring your attention to are those 2 arrows on the side. You see the full risk premium is $1,200. And below that, you see the total annual payment is $1,016. So how risk rating 2.0 is happening is that you are going to be identified as a full risk premium. So a number is going to be given to you. Now, if your current flood insurance premium is lower or is higher than that full risk premium, you will see an immediate decrease to that full risk premium. Now, if your full risk premium is higher than what you're currently paying, federal law prevents us from increasing flood insurance policies more than 18% a year. This is because the Bigot Waters and HFIA 14, they state that flood insurance is to increase every year until they hit full risk rate. But under HFIA 14, full risk rate was never identified. So it was a perpetual increase year after year after year, no less than 5%, no more than 18%. Well, that 18% cap is still in place. So under risk rating 2.0, if your full risk premium is higher than your annual payment, your insurance premium will not increase more than 18% a year until you hit that full risk premium. But when you hit that full risk premium, the rate increases finally stop. That is really big, really new under the way we write flood insurance. Under the legacy system, because the full risk premium was never identified, it would have been a perpetual increase, would happen forever. Now, those increases under the legacy system have been increasing as well. So when I first took the position, they were averaging about 67%. For the past 2 years, it's been about a 12% increase. So regardless, under risk rating 2.0 or the legacy system, there are yearly increases that are experienced. So one of the things we wanted to bring attention is the different variables. As you can see from the first box, the building premium and content premium, we all know those are the deciding factors in how premiums are charged. But what we need to include is the ICC premium, which is changing. Instead of a flat fee, is changing to a 1.9% of the overall premium. But that community rating system discount. Now, Pam is going to talk a little bit about CRS and it's important, but we can see here that it's a $300 discount for the community to participate in the CRS. This is huge for us. Under risk rating 2.0, there are not as many opportunities to receive statutory discounts. So the ones that are there, it's important that the community and the individual homeowners work together to try to get those discounts. And CRS is one, I won't say it's the easiest one, but it's the one that would have a more impact community-wide than individuals. And we also have statutory discounts. Well, under risk rating 2.0, statutory discounts such as pre-firm and newly mapped have to remain in place. So if your structures are eligible for those, you will receive a discount as well. But one things that are not changing are the fees and surcharges. As you can see, there's a reserve fund assessment fee. That is 18% of the premium. You have the 5 surcharge. In this case, is 25. That means it's a primary home. If it's a secondary or third home, it'll be 250. The federal policy fee has transitioned from $50 to $47. And the probation surcharge. If a community is put on probation, it does have a $50 per policy increase until the community is removed from probation. Let's go ahead and go over to the next slide, please. Okay, so the new rating elements, one of the biggest factors that we're seeing right now that has a great impact on the flood insurance premium is replacement cost. Before it was kind of unfair. You had lower valuation homes subsidizing higher valuation homes. And what I mean by this, if you have 2 houses side by side, all the flood zone is identical, but one house is valued at $2 million and the other house is valued at $200,000. Under the legacy system, their premium was the same. Now that's unrealistic and unfair because the house that is $2 million is obviously going to have more damage and meet the statutory cap of $250,000 a lot faster than the house that's $200,000. So to make it more fair, the replacement cost value for each structure is now being a main variable on the way flood insurance premiums are written. So the higher value your home is, the higher your flood insurance is going to be. The lower value your home is, the lower your flood insurance premiums are going to be. We are also going off of the first floor height. Now, this is a new process. It's very similar to the BFE compared to the lowest floor. The only difference is that we are asking the question, what is the difference between the lowest floor and the lowest adjacent grade? The lowest adjacent grade is the lowest point of the foundation where it touches the ground. That's all we want. We have that. We want that information. And because we want that specific information, we have created a tool called the first floor height tool to provide this for the owners. That means elevation certificates will no longer be required for flood insurance. Now, it's important to remember all these changes under risk rating 2.0 impact insurance. It does not impact floodplain management or floodplain compliance. So if under 44 CFR, elevation certificates are still required. CRS communities, elevation certificates are still required. But to purchase flood insurance, we have the first floor height tool, which will provide this information for fully 80% of our book of business. So a vast majority of our book of business will have this information. Now, the number of prior claims have always been a variable for flood insurance, and it's going to continue that way under risk rating 2.0. But there is a caveat here. Under risk rating 2.0, every policyholder who transitions to risk rating 2.0 upon their renewal will start with a clean slate for prior flood claims. Now, this will remain this way until they file their first claim under risk rating 2.0. At that time, all prior flood claims will come back. Now, another thing risk rating 2.0 is initiating is a 20-year rolling period. At the end of that 20 years, if you have a claim, that claim will fall off. So that'll help alleviate long-term flood events. For example, if you have flooding in the late 70s, early 80s, 20 years, those will fall off. So this is really great. It's going to help with the keeping a little bit more track of flood frequencies in comparison to the flood events and the claims filed for that home. Distance to flooding source. Well, this is being used. It's going to be a geolocation tool. We're going to take the address. We are going to convert that to latitude, longitude when you put it into the risk rating engine. And that latitude and longitude is going to be pinged off a series of data sets. And that data set is going to give you the distance to flooding source. Now, when we say distance to flooding source, we mean flooding sources. We mean rivers. We mean lakes. We mean oceans, large canals. If you have a small creek running behind your back of your house, more than likely, that's not going to constitute a flooding source, but it will now be taken in consideration for the variables. The closer you are to a flooding source, the more your flood insurance is going to be. The further you are away from the flooding source, the less your flood insurance is going to be. Once again, a truly risk-based program, which is risk rating 2.0, individual risk characteristics for each and every building. So, and that brings us into construction type. If you choose to be within close distance to flooding sources, elevate that, but elevate it on masonry. We have determined that masonry type construction experiences less damage than wood frame. So therefore, they're going to receive a construction discount. And also foundation types. You know, we have seen slab on grade foundations experience significant flooding events, while elevated structures such as elevated on pier piles, beams, elevated on crawl space, shear walls experience less damage. So they're going to receive a foundation type of a discount. Once again, these are going to kind of benefit new construction, but help incentivize mitigation for older structures as well, especially for pre-firm if they ever hit the substantial damage threshold and they have to bring their houses into code. Instead of elevating slab on grade, let's go ahead and throw some piers, piles, or posts underneath them, get them elevated, and therefore they can achieve some more statutory discounts, such as flood venting. Flood venting used to be a discount that was only available to structures inside of the special flood hazard area. But because of risk rating 2.0, that flood venting discount, which can be from 3 to 27%, is now eligible for every structure in the jurisdictional bounds of the participating community. So that could be a big way to achieve a discount. And not only that, we are also taking into consideration the square footage of the structure. Once again, such as replacement cost value, the higher the square footage of the home, the more likely it's going to increase the replacement cost value. So it will have an impact on the variable. Once again, smaller homes, lower replacement cost value. We're starting to see the equity in action come into play here. Lower valued homes, lower square footage homes should have lower flood insurance premiums compared to their larger and more expensive neighbors. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. So this is an example of an actual declaration page, and we can see all the processes coming together. As you can see from the top left, this structure has $75,000 coverage for the building and $30,000 coverage for the content. They maintain a $2,000 deductible, which the deductible can still have an impact on the premium. The higher deductible, the lower the premium, but it won't have as much impact as it did under the legacy system. Under the legacy system, by taking your deductible all the way to the full $10,000 amount, you could lower your flood insurance premium by 35%. That doesn't experience the same way under risk rating 2.0, but it will still lower the premium. As you can see, it's primary residence. Primary residence dictates to us that it's going to experience 18% glide path if it's eligible for that. So as long as this is not a severe repetitive loss, it will be 18% glide path. We can see that it's a single family dwelling, so it meets the purpose for residential. It's the main dwelling, so the main dwelling also reinforces the 18% glide path because you either have your primary or non-primary for the building. Non-primary can experience up to 25% on the glide path. Once again, FEMA is focused on ensuring people have a home. When you have rentals or you own multiple homes, we're concerned about the home you live in. The first floor height, as you can see, is 2.6 and some change feet. That's determined by the first floor height tool. Now, if the homeowner has some type of post-construction elevation certificate and they want to submit that, they can. If that information provides a better rate, we will accept that. FEMA will accept information as long as it's credible, so stamped and sealed, either ground survey or elevation certificate, and we will input that information to give the insured the most advantageous of a rate. We see the date of construction, substantial improvement. That's important. We keep track of those as well. We see the replacement cost value is fully identified, $233,000, 0 claims. Okay, so even if this house had 1 claim, it will still be rated as a 0 because FEMA gives you a freebie for the first one. The number of units is 1. So the premium details, let's talk about this. So the premium for the building is $391. For the content is $210. We break it down easier for you. The ICC is based off 1.9% of the premium for the building, so it's $11. So we see a mitigation discount. Well, the mitigation discount is not broken down for us here, but one of the mitigation discounts does apply, and you're receiving a negative 21, so a discount of $21 off. So we see the full risk premium is $591. Okay, so now we jump down to the statutory discounts. The structure is not eligible for a pre-firm, not eligible for a newly mapped, and does not meet any other statutory discounts as well. So, and as also going up to the premium details, we see that the community is a non-participating community when it comes to the CRS, so no discount there as well. So when we go down to fees and surcharges, I really dislike that reserve fund assessment fee, but it's something that is on and we can't do anything about it. It's 18%, so it's fully $106. Add on all the other fees and surcharges, we're looking at $769 for the annual payment. Okay, so the full risk premium is $591. The annual payment is $769. It's imperative to remember that there is a difference between the premium when we talk about increases and fees and surcharges. Fees and surcharges are never part of the premium, but they are part of the total annual premium. They're added on at the end, such as we see here in the declaration pages, the last to be added on. So the full risk premium for this structure is $591. But once you add on the fees and surcharges, you're at $769, and that will be what is paid for the first year. Since the structure is at full risk rate, however, there will no longer be any annual increases unless there's a significant change to any of these variables. For example, they change the building coverage to 200,000. That will change the premium. Or if the first floor height is there's a post construction mitigation project and it's elevated, that variable will change. So that will impact the premium. And if there's any administrative changes to the fees or surcharges, that will change the the question in there, what is pre-firm? Pre-firm is simply the date in question. Home was constructed before the initial firm of a community. Those are pre-firm. They normally go off of a date. So you can have pre-firm several times after map changes. And I believe in, I forget what year we implemented the newly mapped procedure, but we no longer do pre-firm when new maps change. We simply go for the newly mapped. But pre-firms were simply that the homeowner didn't know that it was in a special flood hazard area at the time because it wasn't mapped. Then it was mapped in, now it's pre-firm. So that this declaration page is very useful. This was one of the first declaration pages that the RFLs, the regional flood insurance liaisons throughout the entire country, were able to get our hands on and dissect and look at. It has a lot of good information on here for the insured. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so, well, we're actually coming up to a question here. There's a question from Katrina. If you disagree with the current flood insurance rate, who do you contact? Well, it's not necessarily who you contact, it's what you provide. Okay, so a lot of times we're seeing errors on risk rating 2.0 are simple data entry errors. As I mentioned earlier, some examples are 300,000 replacement cost values are being inputted as 3 million. Geolocation tool, the geolocation tool is pretty straightforward. You put in the address, but the address has to be correct. It has to be the location of the address. So if you have a PO box or something like that, it's not going to work. It's going to convert those address to latitude and longitude, and then that's what's going to ping off the geolocation tool. So it's imperative that the right location is being identified by the agents before they continue with the quote process. Okay, so with these two, these are the major errors we're seeing under risk rating 2.0, but there could be others as well. Now, if you want to contest the data, that's fine. You know, we try our hardest to provide the most accurate information, but sometimes there's better information that we're just unaware of. So the risk rating engine gives you the opportunity to input data fields from elevation certificates or data fields from surveys which have ground elevations. And then that information could be calculated. And once again, the homeowner will be receiving the most advantageous of rate. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. Okay, square footage is a big one. Provide the total finished living area. Do not include the following areas in the square foot calculation. So any garage area, basement or enclosure, or porches or deck. The basement is really important nowadays. Basement used to be a very confusing aspect on how to determine flood insurance under the legacy system. However, under risk rating 2.0, basements will no longer be considered part of the lowest floor. It will be considered part of the foundation type. So it's going to be one of 6 foundation types. So the lowest floor is still going to be where the question of the lag, lowest shades grade compared to the lowest floor is. If it's a slab on grade foundation, as simple as that, you're going to have a small first floor height compared to something that's elevated. But if you have a basement, it won't be calculated anymore because floors only count above ground or higher. So we want to ensure that the information is being correctly inputted into the calculator, and also that we are not including any enclosed areas such as garages, basements, especially elevated structures and V zones to include the enclosure areas. Once again, porches or decks are also not to be included as well for the square footage to be inputted to the calculator. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay. Single family homes, the type of construction. You self-report this with your agent, okay? The calculator is very simple. The application is very simple. You're just going to self-report the type of construction type. Now, some documentations are going to have to be submitted for underwriter review. So if you have documentation that shows that it's a masonry type construction instead of a frame, this is going to have to be inputted in the attachment window, so they can be reviewed by the underwriters. But this is a way to ensure that the house is being properly rated. There's going to be 3 types of constructions, either frame, masonry, or other. We know frame is very simple. It's either metal or wood framing for the first floor. Masonry, self-explanatory. It has to be a rock type construction for the first floor. The thing to remember is what we are concerned about is the floor that's going to take the brunt of the flooding event. So once again, masonry, brick, rock type construction experiences less damage during flooding. So therefore, they're going to receive a discount when it comes to their premium. Frame, metal type construction, once again, experiencing more damage. So therefore, they're not going to receive the discount the masonry type construction is. Now, we know there's a lot of different construction types. So we have other. And now other and less specifically stated, it's going to be the same rate as frame. So that's something that we need to watch out for, but it's up to the homeowners and the agents to self-certify this information. Next slide, please. Okay, so we recognize 6 foundation types on the application form. We have 3 that are going to be non-elevated, and we have 3 that are going to be elevated. Now, we understand there are going to be multiple different type of foundations out there, but hopefully they are identified and being able to write into one or the other. So we got slab on grade, non-elevated, basement, non-elevated, elevated without enclosure and post-pile and piers, elevated with enclosure, post-piles or piers, elevated with enclosure, not post-pile or piers, solid foundation walls, and we got crawl spaces. So those are going to be our 6 simple foundation types. So the complexity of what was the legacy system is being reduced significantly from 80 different diagrams down to 6. So we are hoping that this alleviates a lot of errors. We are hoping that the confusing and the complex system of how to write flood insurance under risk rating 2.0 has been addressed and is no longer as confusing, and it helps people understand, especially for new construction, the type of foundations that are going to realize the most premium decreases or discounts for that new construction. I can't imagine building slab on grade foundations now, knowing that a lot of the statutory discounts under risk rating 2.0 apply community wide. No longer are they restricted just to the special flood hazard area. For community-wide, for example, in Louisiana, even though you may be protected by levee in an egg zone, but by building an elevated platform, you're going to be eligible for the machinery and equipment discount of 5%. You're going to be eligible for the construction type of discount. You're going to be eligible for the foundation type discount. And as long as the community is participating in the CRS, you'll be eligible for the CRS type discount. That is multiple discounts stacked on top of each other. You can see substantial savings by mitigating these houses, especially for new construction. And let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Okay, so I already mentioned this a couple of times, but elevation certificates can still be submitted. No longer required but to buy flood insurance. This is really big for me. As the riffle, there was no way for me to be able to waive or do away with the cost of an elevation certificate. It was always on the homeowner. So some people simply couldn't afford. They can afford, you know, a couple $100, $700, $800 for a preferred risk policy, but what they couldn't afford was the $1,500, $2,000 for a surveyor to come out and do an elevation certificate. So they chose not to have flood insurance. Well, the first floor height tool is doing away with the requirement for elevation certificate. But as I said earlier, it can still be advantageous of some insured to submit the information found on the EEC to ensure, one, that the information is correct, and two, maybe have a better rate if the information is newer, more accurate, and shows that the premium is going to be reduced. We will accept that. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please.
Sure. And Gilbert, we do have a few questions that came in the chat. So let's take a few of those right now. So I think, you know, knowing what information potentially could be provided that could change a premium is important to know, right? So you just went over one of them, for example, right? The first floor height and being able to provide an elevation certificate. And Fema or your agent will be able to use whichever one is more advantageous to you. So great. So one of the questions that came in was saying that if a customer doesn't agree with the rating, you know, who are they submitting this documentation to support the rationale? And the comment was an insurance agent might not know, you know, which items can be adjusted. So for example, first floor height is clearly one of those that elevation certificate could be an acceptable form of documentation. What about things like the replacement cost value, Gilbert?
An appraisal. If you have an appraisal for your home, the certified appraisal done by a professional, that can be submitted as well. Once again, that'll also go through your agent. Now, if your agents are not well versed on this, here's the thing. Risk Rating 2.0 training has been open to agents for almost a full year now. Unfortunately, in Louisiana, now these numbers are a little bit dated, about a month. We had 845 agents take advantage of training in Louisiana. I would encourage you to shop around for new agents, someone who understands that Risk Rating 2.0 is changing. It's here. A lot of people were under the impression that it was going to be delayed, it was going to be stopped, and maybe not materialized. Well, it has happened, and agents have to get to speed on what is happening under Risk Rating 2.0. They have control of the risk rating engine. A lot of this information, especially for the discounts, are all self-reporting. So if agents are unaware of this and they're not able to articulate this to their clients, they are doing a disservice to their clients. But as we were saying, the information can be submitted through their agents to Fema if they believe the information is correct, such as the elevation certificate when we're talking about the elevations compared to the lag versus the first floor. If there's ground or surrounding elevations, if they submit a ground survey that's stamped and sealed, once again, we can compare that information. The replacement cost value of the home, if they believe that we don't have it right, they can submit appraisals and we can take that information, but all this has to go through their agents into the calculator.
Awesome. Thank you, Gilbert. And just so you know, education is ongoing for insurance agents. So tons of trainings, for example, this month, they're specifically for insurance agents, but others are welcome to attend as well. So you can find those trainings at agents.floodsmart.gov. And if you go to the training tab, you'll see a list of Risk Rating 2.0 training. So that would be good as well. We'll take one more question before moving on. There was a question on what about homes that are built slab on grade? The question is, are you saying no one should be building slab on grade? Gilbert, can you talk a little bit about that in terms of some of the flood protection benefits of having an open foundation? And then also, kind of adding on to that, the person was saying, hey, our local building regulations may limit an open or a raised foundation.
Yeah, you're right. If city ordinances does not allow it, then it can't take place. But in areas where it can happen, I would encourage elevation, pure pylon post or crawl space. For one, it allows the unimpeded flow of water to flow underneath the house. So therefore, you don't create an unnecessary negative impact on your neighbors, because when you elevate, you bring in fill, right? You elevate that platform, then you put the foundation down. Well, that water still has to go someplace, so it can't go up your hill, so it's going to go downhill to your neighbors. Negative impact or inadvertent impact. It's not done on
Good
purpose,
morning, Leonard and Bloom.
but it does happen.
Hello.
There we go. Now she's on me. So it does happen. Now for the discounts. Now I understand slab on grade foundations are what they are. Okay. There are discounts that slab on grade foundations simply won't be eligible for because they're slab on grade. The machinery and equipment discount is a 5% discount. It's not big a discount, but it's still 5% nonetheless. Now the thing about machinery and equipment discount is all machinery and equipment have to be on the elevated to the proper identified floor. So slab on grade proper identified floor is the attic. Well, it's not practical to have all of the equipment in the attic, because if you have building coverage only, we are talking about your AC, your HVAC, right? But if you have building and coverage, now we're talking about appliances such as washer, dryer, dishwasher, all that would have to be elevated to the attic, not practical. But if you have an elevated platform, crawl space, the proper floor is the next highest floor, which is definitely achievable. So not only are you going to be eligible for the machinery and equipment discount, you can also be eligible for the flood venting discount, right? And also for the construction discount because you're an elevated platform. So you can start to see how these discounts are going to add on top of each other, and they do compound each other. You don't get one or the other. If you're eligible for a discount, you get all those discounts. So yes, I know, like I said, this is kind of geared more towards new construction or for mitigating pre-firm homes that are maybe deemed substantial damage or substantial improvement. But they're the discounts are open community wide now. So we really incentivizing mitigation for risk rating 2.0.
Thanks, Gilbert. So we'll move on here. We'll track a few more of the questions for answering later, but yeah, we definitely want to make it clear we're not expecting real estate professionals to be experts here at all. We're just trying to provide you a little bit more information that you can pass along, because you guys may get these questions as well. So being able to simply advise your client, can they provide an elevation certificate to potentially help with their premium? That's very simple advice, for example. So there is more training available.
Let me address that comment. No, we're not penalizing slab on grade. They're just not eligible for discounts. So depending on the individual risk assessments, right? I've helped a couple of people in Baton Rouge who have experienced a decrease with slab on grade foundations. So you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. If you're close to water, you're close to the Lake Pontchartrain, you're close to the Gulf, you're close to flooding sources, and your slab on grade type foundations, those are going to experience a rate increase. But if you're further away, the ground and surrounding elevations, even slab on grades can't experience a decrease. So we're not penalizing slab on grades. You're just being raised on the individual risk assessments. That is where that house is located. Okay, so the next slide, assignment of a flood policy. Under the legacy system, you've been able to assign an existing policy over to a new or prospective buyer. That's going to continue under risk rating 2.0. Now you're asking me, why is it going to be beneficial? Because, right, we're all transitioning to a higher full risk premium. Well, the 18% glide path is going to start very similar to what the insured was paying under the legacy system. So let's use a grandfathered or PRP. Those are the lowest of the low policies that we had. So they're going away, but their starting point is not. So if they had a grandfather policy under the legacy system, they're going to start their transition to risk rating 2.0 at a lower starting point, which gives them more time to prepare and plan for the incremental increase of 18% until they hit their full risk premium. So you'll still be able to assign the flood policy to a new or prospective buyer. And once again, it makes that house more marketable. There are requirements. This is done at closing. As something that can take place 30 days beyond closing, plus 29 days to submit the endorsement from the insurance processor. It's important to remember that the prospective buyer is basically taking on the flood insurance policy through whoever is the insured. So they are taking on the policy. So at later time, they can actually transition that to whoever insurance provider they want. But until that time, they are taking over the existing flood insurance policy. So this is something really hard to communicate, especially with a lot of younger families, because they really want nothing to do with the old home. Well, in some cases, such as this, assignment of an existing flood insurance policy is beneficial to the prospective buyer and can help them maintain that 80% glide path. Under risk rating 2.0, this is really important for me to bring up. Once a policy exceeds the 30-day grace period, it will automatically and without any type of repeal or recourse become a lapse in coverage. Before, under the legacy system, we can do a 30-day grace period and we can do 30 to 90 days and get you back in the same policy. But under risk rating 2.0, FEMA does not have that latitude anymore. So it's very imperative that these and all policies premiums be paid within the due date or within the 30-day window. Next slide, please. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit. I'm sorry, I kind of jumped around a little bit, but the mitigation discounts, okay? So slab on grade, not elevated, more than one floor, all the machinery equipment have to be elevated to the attic. As I mentioned earlier, it's not practical for that type of situation, but what we can receive this machinery equipment discount, if you look at the diagrams to the right, are elevated structures. Now, the thing about the M&E discount is that all M&E have to be elevated to the proper floor. It can't be one or the other. So for example, in Texas, we have a lot of homes who build small platforms on the outside for their condenser units. Well, that wouldn't be eligible unless it's all elevated to the proper floor. So like I said, this is a 5% discount. It's not a large discount. So we understand that the slab on grade types of home may not be able to achieve this, but once again, it's only a 5% discount. But when you're in an elevated platform, right, chances are you're in a higher risk, you're in an AE zone or V zone. You had a requirement to elevate to, at that time, the BFE or higher, which is still a floodplain compliance or floodplain management requirement. So the opportunity to achieve that discount is there. Let's move on to the next slide, please. This is a big one. I've already talked about this, but before this, flood venting, right, was only eligible to those in the special flood hazard area. Now, the criteria found under 44 CFR 60.3 still apply. So it has to be 1 square inch of net opening for 1 square foot of enclosed area. Still can't be put in more than 12 inches above the highest grade, either interior or exterior, right? It still has to meet all criteria, has to be either engineered flood venting or approved by the local community. But once that is done, then that flood venting discount, and that's done by a formula that's found in the new flood insurance manual for risk rating 2.0. As I said earlier, all buildings are different, so the risk assessment for each one is different as well. So under the new flood insurance manual for risk rating 2.0, we'll articulate how to calculate the vent discount. But oh wow, open to all buildings inside of the special flood hazard area. So, think of manufactured homes that are outside of X zones, right? It's a way for them to achieve discounts if they are in areas that are close to flooding, or, we have seen over the past several years, 65, 70, 75% of structures outside of special flood hazard areas are the one damaged in flooding events. So this is a big thing. It's 3 to 27%. The flood insurance manual has more details on this one. Let's go ahead and move on over to the next slide, please. It's a way to pay less. I think we've done a good job of articulating the discounts here, right? Lower your flood risk, mitigate. Elevation is important under risk rating 2.0 as it has been under the legacy system. The flood ventings, that is a big thing. Fill in basements. Now, fill in basements is not as important as it once was, but basements can still be considered in the foundation types. So if you absolutely do not need this basement, let's get it filled in. Let's use the right foundation type, which will lower your premium. Elevate your property and post piles and piers. I think we've really hammered the importance of new construction type. Not just elevating a pier, pile, and post, but also masonry type construction opposed to wood frame. Relocate your home or business to some areas. If you have land and you have higher points, relocate your home there. Relocate your business to areas where the ground and surrounding area is not as low. Choose a higher deductible. I hesitate for this one, but it will lower your flood insurance premium. At the same time, though, you have to be able to meet that deductible. In areas where you believe our first floor height information may not be accurate, provide the information found on the elevation certificate to your agent. They can input the information for the lag and the lowest floor, and that will help us determine which one is most accurate. And encourage your community to mitigate risk. Right now, one of the easiest discounts that can be achieved community-wide is the CRS. Now, it's not easy for the community to participate in it, but it's going to impact the most amount of homeowners for any one type of mitigation work. The CRS program is a voluntary program. We encourage communities to join, but it's not a requirement to join. It's not a requirement, but if they do want to, a lot of communities are already doing a lot of the work that is needed to join the CRS. You join the CRS as a 10. 10 doesn't get you a discount, but as soon as you get work to a 9, that's 5%. But then once you start getting familiar with the 9, you add in a couple more aspects, and you can go to an 8. Well, I'm not going to talk too much on this because Pam is going to enlighten all of us on that moving forward. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
Right. Let's pause just one moment there, Gilbert. I really appreciate everyone's comments and questions coming in the chat. I think when we're talking about, especially if people are worried about or seeing some premiums going up, that can be, frustrating, or you have a lot of questions on it. And so I think one thing that we're trying to say is that, when we're talking about new construction, we're talking about locally adopted ordinances that are kind of determining how structures are built. And what do we all want? What do you want as a real estate professional? What do Gilbert and I want working with FEMA? What does Pam want working with our state NFIP coordination office? We all want to see new construction that isn't going to flood in 5 years. And we all want to see new construction that won't flood in 40 years, so we're talking about a lot of things here. So for things like new construction, we encourage communities to have those higher standards above what FEMA's minimum standards are. So again, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, and Pam is, and Gilbert will as well. And then when we're talking about construction that's already built, right? So maybe it was built 40 years ago, maybe it was built 5 or 10 years ago. Sometimes if the premiums are very high on those structures, really those structures do need to be mitigated. So we would all like to pay less for things like insurance, right? But with risk rating 2.0, kind of giving that full risk premium, unique properties, flood risk, it is a really good thing for people to understand. Oh, this does have risk. This does come with risk, this property. Gilbert, can you for a moment just remind everyone, so $1,800 sounds like a lot to pay for a flood insurance premium, right? But Gilbert, can you let us know what that average NFIP claim payment is in Louisiana? I think it's about $50,000 is the average NFIP claim in Louisiana. And then when we're talking about a huge event like a 2016 flooding or a Hurricane Laura, or the spring flooding even in May, we're talking about average, claims payments that are much higher. Is that right, Gilbert?
Yeah, so you can use Hurricane Harvey. I know that doesn't impact Louisiana, but I have this number ingrained in my head because it was such a difference. The average flood insurance claim for Hurricane Harvey was $116,000. The average disaster assistance grant was $4,400. Such a stark difference between the numbers. And you want to keep talking, Rebecca? I can pull up the numbers for Hurricane Ida right now.
Awesome. And I think like 2016 was about $90,000 was the average NFIP payment. So while, I 100% empathize with, a premium's going up. But what is that premium getting you? So when we're talking about real estate, for a lot of people, this is the biggest investment they ever make. It's their home. It's something that they're counting on, being in for many, many years, maybe a business, right? So if something happens to that, those average NFIP payments are actually very high. So that's something to take into consideration. I know it's not exactly apples to apples, but if you're thinking about, hey, what do I pay for car insurance per year? And then thinking about what would I pay for flood insurance to be able to protect this biggest investment that I have? And when you look at the average claims, I think that's a really good thing for people to keep in mind when thinking about, is this insurance premium? Is this really, showing the risk for this structure? So
Hurricane Ida, the average flood insurance claim right now is $57,919. Pretty substantial amount.
Awesome. Thank you, Gilbert. And we do have resources. Our contacts are at the end as well. So again, what are some of the actual mitigation options for the structure? So if you're seeing a really high premium, that's going to correlate with really high risk. So how can those structures be mitigated? Potentially, there could be grants out there. There could be some simple steps to take. So again, we're still tracking some comments, but let's move on. I think awesome. So Gilbert will talk about some of those standards that can help not only protect property, but potentially, help with insurance premiums as well. And then we'll get into Pam talking about CRS, and definitely still tracking everyone's questions for the end as well. Thank you.
Okay, so encouraging higher floodplain management standards is important. You heard us talk a little bit about elevation, right? So in most communities, it's achieved by what's called freeboard. Freeboard is they take FEMA minimum standards, right? Normally the BFE, and they add on 1, 2, in some circumstances, 3 feet. So they have 3 foot of freeboard. Well, freeboard is important because it does increase the elevation. Now, the ground and surrounding elevation is just as important under risk rating 2.0 as it is under the legacy system. Now, so if you can imagine, if you did not have that type of elevation and then you add on the additional perils that are being considered under risk rating 2.0, your premiums would be even more expensive than what they are. So elevation is just as important. The freeboard is really good. Setback. Now, we talked about the distance to flooding source. We're talking about 1,000 yards. So 1,000 yards or further from flooding sources. And once again, we're referring major flooding sources, your major rivers, your major lakes, your oceans, those type of flooding sources. So the setback is important as well. And this can also be for some communities. We can't tell people you can't develop in areas that'd be considered taken. But it's imperative that they meet floodplain management requirements when they do develop within these areas. So it may be important for the community to determine additional distance boundaries when it comes to flooding sources. Preservations, well, floodway are highly restricted zones. In fact, they're, besides V zones, are the most restrictive we have. We know water discharge and the velocity is going to be in this area. So we make it very restrictive to develop in these areas, and the communities need to reinforce that and take those floodways what they are, limit the amount of development for anything that has to be functionally dependent on the water, such as a pier, something to that extent. Safeguard elevations in BC and X zones, right? Inadvertent impacts. You can impact your BC and X zones. Those are your areas of minimal flooding, okay? Those are the areas outside of the special flood hazard area. Remember that inside of the special flood hazard area, there are regulations that have to be adhered to. And most times we talk about elevating a home, right? So that elevation normally consists of bringing in fill. Bringing in fill. Just elevate it to the point where the water is being forced to other locations. Well, we have to safeguard those areas of minimal flooding. You can do that by flood control measures, master drainage, ensured, especially new development master drainage is able to tie into existing drainage, but to ensure that the existing drainage can handle the new velocity loads. That's really important. Forecasting BFE and floodways designations based on estimates of fully developed maximum built out conditions. We give maps, okay? And some of these maps, we have very detailed information and others we don't. And those unnumbered A zones, the community is supposed to track their development, right? And by tracking their development, we have an idea of when the map is going to hit its max built out. That means when we have to come back in and provide new maps. Now, I would love to tell you that we can come in and do this anytime, but the reality is that we work with the state. We go off the state recommendations on where mapping projects are going to happen next. And I think that's important that we remember this, because FEMA, we're a federal agency. We just don't go into a state and start dictating things and telling other, the state authorities and local authorities what to do. We are in a partnership. We look for their advice and guidance, and then we provide, most of the time we provide a checkbook. We give them funding. For example, Harris County Flood Control District is having a new maps coming out in 2023. All studies have been done by them, but it's been a grant by FEMA. It's something similar with a lot of the Louisiana higher education centers. A lot of them, LSU Ag Center as a big cooperating technical partner that provided good data on their websites. So we provide checkbooks and we provide concurrence on certain programs, but ultimately the state helps guide FEMA to where areas have to be remapped. By law, we have to look at maps every 5 years, but that does not mean you get a new map every 5 years. That just means they're being reviewed. Let's go ahead and I think I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Pam for this next slide.
Thank you, Gil. Okay, what is Community Rating System, or CRS? It's a voluntary program, as Gil said earlier, that is within the National Flood Insurance Program developed by FEMA. FEMA administers the National Flood Insurance Program, which offers reasonably priced flood insurance to all properties and communities that comply with minimum standards for floodplain management. To be eligible for an NFIP flood insurance policy, a property must first be in a community that participates in the NFIP. And to qualify for the NFIP, a community adopts and enforces a floodplain management ordinance to regulate development in the floodplain. The objective of this ordinance is to minimize the potential for flood damage to development. Here in Louisiana, we have over 300 communities that participate in the NFIP. Now, the community rating system is an incentive program that recognizes and encourages floodplain management practices that exceed the minimum requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. We have 41 communities that participate in the CRS. These 41 communities hold 81% of the state's NFIP policies. The 2017 edition of the Crs Coordinators Manual, in conjunction with the 2021 addendum, are the guidebooks for the CRS. The Coordinators Manual and addendum spells out the credits and credit criteria for community activities and programs that go above and beyond the minimum requirements of the NFIP. The Coordinators Manual explains how the CRS operates, how credits are calculated, and what documents is required, and also acts as guidance for communities enhancing their flood loss reduction and resource protection activities. There are 19 credible activities under 4 categories. We have public information, mapping and regulations, flood damage reduction, and warning and response. Next slide, please. And one of the benefits of the CRS program is a 5 to 45% discount on flood insurance premiums, as previously stated, depending on the community's class rating, along with other benefits listed here. A new requirement that began in January of 2021 with the addendum is that all Class 8 or better CRS communities must have 1 foot of adopted freeboard or flood protection level above the base flood elevation. In the special flood hazard areas. Next slide.
And I think Gilbert's going to talk about the discount and how that's changing with risk rating 2.0.
Okay.
I sure am. So look, we have a list of those communities who are participating in the CRS program for Louisiana. So the best rating right now is a class 5 for Jefferson Parish. And as you can see, that equates to 25% discount. So if you can remember going back to that declaration page where we would have the building premium, the content premium, and then you would have the CRS discount. So for the insured in Jefferson Parish, that number amount would reflect a 25% discount per policyholder. So as you can see, we do have only one class 5, but we have a couple class 6, a large number of class 7, and we go up to 9s. So the CRS community, it's not easy, right? But it's not designed to be easy. It's designed to incorporate higher standards. It's designed to incorporate communication and outreach to the citizens. It's designed to keep records and have those records available open source online so the community can see them, such as elevation certificates, not the personal information on them, but the information for the ECs. Now, all these equate to points. The more points you get, the better class rating you get. Now, let's take a look at the next slide. I just want to show you the number that we have that are 8s and 9s. So as you can see, we start to transition to class 8s, and then we do have some 9s. So even a class 9, 5% discount. So you can add on to this. You can make this easier for your administration to justify participating in the CRS. As real estate professionals, ultimately, you want to make sure that your clients, one, find the property that they absolutely love, and two, ensure that their property is protected. As real estate professionals, we often say that you guys are the tip of the spear. You're the first one to bring the perils of flooding in light to your clients, but also by encouraging them to approach the administration for their communities who are non-participating CRS to open their eyes for the types of discounts that are available. So you go back to Jefferson Parish, 25%, that's substantial. It really is. Now, what preferred risk policy is going away, right? Because we're going to individualized risk assessment. Now, that glide path can be 18% a year. Now, the 25% discount for the CRS is going to be important. It's going to help hedge that possibility of an increase for some policies. So the CRS program is really important. It's something that is out of the hands of the individual homeowners who can ensure that mitigation happens for their structures where they have direct control. But for something for the CRS, it's out of their hands. But by encouraging cooperation with the floodplain administrator for the community, floodplain administrator for the parish, even with the state's office, Cindy's, the state NFIP coordinator, can help educate and guide elected officials to consider participating in the CRS program to help their entire community realize the CRS percentage discount. Because one of the big things about risk rating 2.0 in regards to the CRS, under the CRS program, now the legacy system, CRS was only available to structures inside of the special flood hazard area. But very similar to the venting discount, the CRS percentage discount would now be available to all buildings inside the jurisdictional boundary of that community. So if you go back to Jefferson Parish, every building in that community will be at 25%. Once the structures in the area of minimal flooding hit full risk rate, they will receive the full 25% discount on their flood insurance premium. So that's a big thing. And once again, it's a way to help offset the increase, if there is one, under risk rating 2.0. And I believe I'm handing it back to Pam now.
Yes, thank you, Gail. Okay, if your community does not participate in CRS, encourage them to. And because of the Louisiana Seller's Disclosure Law, listing the flood zone, flooding history, and other flood risk and flood insurance information, communities can automatically get state-based credit, which falls under other disclosure requirements. And which is also under Activity 340, Hazard Disclosure. And they have a couple of other elements that real estate agents can help the CRS community get points. There's the disclosure of flood hazard and the real estate brochure. for the disclosure of the flood hazard. If the real estate agent notifies those interested in purchasing properties located in the special flood hazard area about the flood hazard and the flood insurance purchase requirement, there's up to 25 points in that element. Another element that I said, the real estate brochure, that's up to 8 points. If the real estate agents are providing brochures or handouts that advise potential buyers to investigate the flood hazard property. And then, like I said, in addition to those two is the state-based other disclosure requirements, ODR, which that can go up to, it's 5 points per requirement and a maximum of 25 points. Next slide, please. And Rebecca, I think that's for you.
Thanks, Pam. I know everyone, we're already at that 1 hour mark. If you have to drop, we understand, but just wanted to share some resources, our contact information, and then also be able to get to those questions that did come in the chat. Again, this training will be recorded, so you'll be able to access it at the Louisiana REALTORS site. So if you haven't checked out these links, the main Risk Rating 2.0 Equity in Action website is listed there first. There is a fact sheet. I think it's about 6 pages long, and it does list some of those actions that either individuals can take or the community can take. It also lists some of FEMA's mitigation grant program, so definitely check that out. National Association of Realtors did a fact sheet, kind of a myths and facts on Risk Rating 2.0. So if you haven't seen that as well, check it out. There was a town hall on Risk Rating 2.0. So that's a video that you can access if you haven't seen that. And a lot of the things that we referenced today in terms of either maybe how could you use that elevation certificate, provide that to your insurance agent, and how could they determine height of the first floor from that. A lot of those links that, a lot of those pieces that we were talking about today is information that's in the flood insurance manual, and that's something your insurance agent will be referencing. You can check it out as well. So the link is here. If you want to know more about that CRS program, you can contact your local community to see if they participate. Again, we have a full list of the community, the participating communities here as well. If your community is in CRS, you could potentially, help your community by what you're doing as a real estate professional, how you're helping communicate flood risk and the importance of flood insurance. So our contact information is listed here. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we now want to be able to get through all of the questions that did come into the chat. So I'm gonna stop sharing here. Again, you can access the PDF of the presentation, has all of the links, the documents that we shared. And let's go back through and take some of those questions. All of them good questions. I appreciate comments as well, even frustration. You guys don't just represent your clients. Hopefully you also have flood insurance, especially if you live in Louisiana. I have flood insurance as well, as do many of our FEMA staff. Gilbert, one question came in. This is a really good question, right? So someone was asking, can you use that elevation certificate in a zone X for the insurance agent to determine a different first floor height? And the question was kind of like, well, there is no base flood elevation necessarily in a zone X that would be listed on an elevation certificate. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And just so you know, those directions are in the flood insurance manual for the insurance agent. But go ahead, Gilbert. And I think you're still on mute, Gilbert.
So you do have surveyors out there who are capable to determine a base flood elevation, especially if those surveyors are a professional engineer. There's methods in which they are approved methods in which to determine a BFE in X zones, especially if the X zones are close to AE zones, which have detailed information. So yes, that information can be used in X zones as long as a BFE is determined.
And Gilbert, will it be not necessarily the base flood elevation that's important? If we're talking about the flood insurance side, so it's not necessarily the base flood elevation that would be important. It would be the tool that your insurance agent would be using to determine the first floor height. The question would be, is the first floor height that could be determined based on elements in the on the elevation certificate that could be provided to give a different first floor height.
But the elevation certificate is going to be primarily used to determine the lowest adjacent grade and the first floor on the elevation certificate, bottom of the highest floor. So those are going to be what's the information that's going to be inputted. Having the BFE on the EC is important, but you know, well, I know it's difficult to remember this, but we're no longer going to be using flood insurance rate maps and BFEs as a direct variable to write the flood insurance premium. So even though we're used to saying BFE under the risk rating 2.0, we're primarily concerned with just the first floor height. So the first floor height is answering the question, how high is, well, what is the difference between the lowest adjacent grade and the first floor? So that information can still be provided from the elevation certificate because EC does have the lowest adjacent grade, highest adjacent grade, has a lot of other information on it besides what we primarily looked at before, which was just the flood zone and BFE compared to the lowest floor. So the information is still there, and that's why we still accept elevation certificates under risk rating 2.0.
Thanks, Gilbert. And again, if your agent isn't aware, the instructions for how to do that, which numbers would they take, which calculations will they take off the elevation certificate, those directions are in the flood insurance manual. Again, not something you need to know as a real estate professional, but the agent would need to know. Another question was, if you, let's say you currently have a policy, because Gilbert, you talked about, hey, if maybe this is new business, you could get a few different quotes from different insurance agents. They may have different levels of experience. Someone was asking, you know, what if you currently have a policy? Would switching agents kind of get rid of that gliding scale? Can you switch agents and keep your, you know, policy discounts?
No, switching agent. No matter what agent you go through, we have a series of what's called write your own partners. So you have 60 odd major companies. So the agents write their flood insurance policy through one of their umbrella companies, you know, and I don't advocate one company or the other, but just, you know, for example, USAA, Nationwide, writing flood insurance, they all write flood insurance policies through the guidance from FEMA. So all the criteria from the flood insurance is going to be the same, regardless of what agents you go through. However, you are going to find some agents that, and when I say agents, I'm referring to insurance agents who are more experienced and knowledgeable than others. So FEMA's requirements is you can't have more than one flood insurance policy under the NFIP. So we encourage you, if you want to transition to a different agent, you wait until your renewal time, and then you just do a change of business renewal. Now, as long as there's not a break in coverage, if you maintain continuous coverage and you had some type of a discount available for you, especially a statutory discount such as pre-firm or newly mapped, they will carry with you to a new agent if you want to change at your renewal time.
Thanks, Gilbert. Another question was, in calculating that replacement cost value, is the insurance agent inputting things like square footage to derive at that figure, or is the system kind of giving a replacement cost value? And then again, additional would be, what could you provide if you think it's different than what you know, the quote or the declaration is showing?
Okay, so the system, we have a new tool, this replacement cost value tool. We provide that information. So if you believe the information is incorrect, that's when you can get an appraisal and contest that information by sending that information through the calculator with your agent.
Awesome, thank you. And then let's see, a following question. What about, someone was asking about basements. Is a basement considered a foundation type? They were kind of confused, you know, if something has a basement, is that the foundation type? How does that work?
So before, under the legacy system, basement would be part of the lowest floor. So that really hurt a lot of people, especially if you had a sunken living room, you know, like the 60s architecture. The sunken living rooms are very popular. Well, that's subgrade surrounded on all four sides. So definition of a basement under FEMA's eyes. So the lowest floor would be where that sunken living room would be. It's the same if you actually had a basement, that would be the lowest floor. So that could be 7-8 feet below the BFE. Really had a negative impact. Under risk rating 2.0, basement is not going to be considered for the lowest floor, but it will be considered for the foundation type. Remember, we're going to have 6 different types of foundations. One of them is slab on grade with basement. But for the lowest floor, we're only going to calculate floors above ground level. So it's still going to have impact, just not as a severe impact as it did under the legacy system.
Thanks, Gilbert. Would using an elevation certificate for new construction, you think, would that be even more important if the kind of the rating engine is kind of pulling data that's either ground truth data that the data sets can access, or kind of generalized information? So with new construction, do you think that would be even kind of more important to provide that elevation certificate for?
I do, and let me tell you why. Because the updates for the risk rating tool, especially for the first floor height tool, have still yet to be determined. We know they have to be updated, but the question is how many times? 1 time a year, 5 times a year? That hasn't been decided. So there will be periods of times where it's not updated. So especially for post-construction, right, new construction, the elevation certificate more than likely will have better information than what we have for the first floor height tool. So in situations like that, I would encourage submittal of the information on the EC for the application.
Thanks, Gilbert. And then a question kind of specific to an area in Louisiana. The question is, how does distance to flooding source work in things like Orleans and Jefferson Parish when land adjacent to the Mississippi River or Lake Pontchartrain might have higher elevations than the middle of the city, which is shaped like a bowl?
Yep, it's shaped like a bowl. It's low-lying area. So not only are you concerned about distance to flooding sources, which 1,000 yards. So there's some places in there in Orleans where you won't have that 1,000 yards capability, but now you're looking at fluvial peril flooding, and that's rainfall, which is new to risk rating 2.0. It was never taken into consideration under the legacy system. So we saw what flow was that, and the multiple pumps went down in New Orleans, and a lot of communities flooded because the pumping measures of the levee control system failed. So there's new variables added in. So even though you may not be impacted by the distance to flooding sources, the new variables added in will make it look like your premiums more likely be a little bit higher.
Thanks, Gilbert. Next question. If an insurance agent runs a new quote, will it show what your new rate will be?
They will, but they don't. I advise against this because the new quote is new business. And under new business for risk rating 2.0, you come in at full risk rate immediately. It has to be done as a renewal. A renewal is going to give you your 18% glide path or whatever your glide path is. So therefore, you'll have 2 different numbers. You'll have your full risk rate, and then you'll have your actual annual pay rate, which if your full risk premium is significantly higher than what you're currently paying, this is your 18% glide path. For a new quote for new business, you come in as straight full risk rate from the beginning.
And I think that's something that is really nice. So for example, whether you're new business or you're a renewal, you will be able to see what is your full risk premium kind of, so I think that's really important. That's something that's new. For example, when we were talking about what used to be preferred risk policies in a zone X, for example, I think people kind of get used to, hey, this was about this much money, you could, and you guys as real estate professionals probably, got used to that. I think residents probably got used to that. Hey, it might be about this much per year, but each structure is being looked at, its unique risk factors, and each policy now will show whether it's a renewal or new business, what that full risk rate will be. And that's data, that's information that really can help people make the best decisions, for themselves, for their investment, for their future. Another question was, what is the tool that determines first floor height? And they were asking, is that satellite, and how can you ensure that it's accurate?
So the first floor height tool is a new product, and we have contracted out for a company called CoreLogic. Now, using a series of open source data and proprietary products, they have been able to provide or answer that question. Remember, what is the distance between the lowest shaded grade and the first floor height for 80% of our building. Now, this isn't simply just satellite imagery. This is a lot of effort of boots on the ground, a lot of compiling information, a lot of data analytics to comprise this. And we have found the accuracy to be very, very good. In fact, we have did away with our special rating guidebook, which was a guidebook that was used for rating of special structures, such as unique structures like an airplane converted to a home, or homes that have been rated at negative 2, 3, 4, 5 feet below BFE. The risk rating engine based off the first floor height has been able to provide very accurate rates for a lot of our structures in the book of business. So we do know that we have about 80% of coverage. So we got about 20%. Now we got two other avenues to determine the first floor height. One of them is FEMA based assumptions. We don't want to go that way because they're very, very conservative. In fact, FEMA assumptions won't go higher than 2 feet. So if you have an elevated house, especially on pier piles on post, our assumptions are going to assume the highest it is 2 feet. So the third method, of course, we've talked about this multiple times, is submittal of the elevation certificate information. So, you know, the first floor height tool, we have a lot of confidence in this, but like I said, you know, mistakes can happen. So submittal of that EC information is just a way to ensure that everything is properly rated.
And there's the potential that the tool could actually be more beneficial to someone than the first floor height you might get off the elevation certificate, and FEMA will actually accept whichever one is more beneficial to the structure owner. So that's a good thing. Question, Gilbert, what happens to existing policies? So those coming up for renewal, existing policies on April 1st, 2022. What is that change?
So April of 2022 is phase 2 of risk rating 2.0. Phase 1 started October 1 for new business. Any new business as of October 1 came in at a risk rating 2.0 full risk rate. Now, if you have a renewal that is after October 1, but before April of 2022, you have an option. You can choose. You can opt into risk rating 2.0 if the insurance premium benefits you, or you can choose legacy system. April of 2022 is phase 2. All flood insurance policies in FEMA's book of business will transition to risk rating 2.0 upon the renewal time.
Thank you, Gilbert. A question came on could people with basements, or could even a renter in a basement get contents coverage? And yes, that's possible, but contents coverage is very limited in terms of what is covered under your flood insurance policy. And there is an excellent video. If you go to YouTube and you search FEMA Office of the Flood Insurance Advocate, they did a whole video on what is covered and what is not covered in basements. So I would definitely check that out. It's definitely good. Again, the more information people have, going eyes wide open into not only a real estate transaction, but hey, what does my policy cover? That's really important to know. Another question was, what purpose does the flood insurance rate map serve at this point? So great question.
So the flood insurance rate maps used to be one of the main variables to determine your flood insurance premium. It is still being used. Flood insurance rate maps will still determine what is called mandatory purchase requirements. Mandatory purchase requirements are homes that have used a mortgage that have been touched by federal dollars. It could be Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, HUD. If federal dollars are used to touch that mortgage, mandatory purchase of flood insurance is required if the house is located in the special flood hazard area. So they still will be used for that purpose.
Thank you.
$10,000 is the highest deductible for a policyholder. I just saw that last question pop up, Rebecca.
Great, awesome. Yeah, important to know as well, the flood insurance rate map. So again, kind of a main purpose being, hey, who does have that mandatory purchase? And then also what are at least the minimum building and rebuilding standards for NFIP participating communities. And this is something that we really want to stress with the flood insurance rate maps. So these are tied to what a community has to adopt and enforce at that local level. So, you know, what elevation, you know, do we at least have to build structures to in our high risk area? What types of materials? Worrying about, thinking about, hey, what is a floodway and what might be extra regulations on structures that would be considered to be built in a floodway. So one thing that we really, really want to stress is FEMA's standards are minimum standards, and a community at least has to adopt those, but we really, really encourage the communities to adopt better, higher, more protective floodplain management, building and rebuilding standards in their communities. So flood insurance rate maps are going to show how high we think water is going to rise for a certain size event, but we all know that water rises to and above that. Events happen that are greater than the events that those maps are created for. So it's really important to know that we encourage higher locally adopted floodplain management standards. So the firms are a minimum floodplain management standard, and then also looking at that, designating those mandatory purchase areas. Another question was, should a client ask his or her insurance agent what the full rate will be, even though the prior policy is transferred, to know where the glide path will end up?
So the thing about this is FEMA has guidance on what is required to be on the declaration page of the flood insurance policy. There is no set guidance on what is on a quote that each individual agent provides. So FEMA provides the quote, but it's up to the WIO and their agencies determine how much information they want to put on the quote. So I have seen some agencies have very detailed quotes. It looks very similar to the declaration page. And I have seen some WIOs who only have the number itself compared to the deductible. For example, if you choose a $2,000 deductible, this is your premium. If you choose a $5,000 deductible, this is your premium. So I would definitely ask the agents, what is the full risk rate? Some agents are simply not capable of answering that question because their information under their SOP from their providers, their WIOs, simply don't show that until the declaration page.
And Gilbert, so after April, every policy will be able to show what that full risk rate is, right? So that's a positive.
On the declaration page.
Awesome. Okay. And I think the question was, hey, if the policy is transferred, so again, upon renewal or after that April timeframe, the good thing that people will know that. Can you ask before that timeframe? It's always good to ask, will they be able to provide that or not?
See, for existing policies, it's not as much a concern because you can get well, if it's an existing policy for yourself, you already have an old declaration page to compare the numbers. For an assignment rollover, you can ask the current owner for a copy of the declaration page. They're taking over that policy and you have that information to begin with. It's new business I have a concern with because a lot of times they won't see the new full risk premium until they get the declaration page, which kind of means they have to buy the policy to look at the declaration page. I have brought this concern up to headquarters, but that is way above my head. I believe the number for the full risk premium should be on the quote itself. But once again, that's way above my head.
Thanks, Gilbert. All right, we have 2 more questions at this point. Question is, hey, if I have a brand new construction home, it's under contract, it's looking like the flood insurance premium is about $3,000 annually. What could be done to reduce that rate? So I guess the first question is it already constructed, right? Would be, sounds like it's potentially already constructed, that it is new construction. If it's not constructed yet, you could definitely think about some different variables. And then if it's already constructed, you might have different options. So Gilbert, do you want to kind of summarize some of those?
Yeah, so this is something that you can talk to me offline on this because there's so many variables. Remember, we are going to individualize risk assessment. So we need to figure out what risks are associated with this new construction home. Once again, proximity to flooding sources, the ground and surrounding elevations, if it's masonry or versus wood frame construction, all those are going to play a part. And I also have an idea that the replacement cost value of this is probably substantially higher than the normal homes. And we have seen this. We are seeing premiums increases for homes that are going, replacement cost value of $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. So we can talk about that, and I'll be more than happy to discuss it with you and see what we can do. Once again, let's talk about the foundation type. Slab on grade foundations. It's going to be harder to achieve a lot of the discounts that you can see in areas where it is elevated on pure piles of post or some type of crawl space. So let me jump right into that last question. Concern the full risk rate is a moving target. It is not. The full risk rate is a set rate. It is the set number. It's not going to change. You'll have that same number on your declaration bill until you hit it. So it's not a moving number. The only time it's a moving number is if something of significance changes on the variables used to write your flood insurance premium, such as your replacement cost value. If your house increases in value, double the amount, it goes from $250,000 home to a $500,000 home, then of course that number can change. But those are substantial changes that occur over time, so it may not be something you experience yearly. So by far and large, it's not going to be a moving number unless something significant changes.
Thank you, Gilbert. Awesome questions, participation from everyone. Appreciate your time. You real estate professionals are so important, right? You're working with your clients who expect so much from you. They have a lot of questions. They'll be looking to you. It's okay if you don't have all the answers, of course, but you want to be able to point them in the right direction, right? So definitely download the presentation if you haven't seen it. There'll be a recording link up on the Louisiana Realtor site. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We appreciate everything that you guys do to help let your clients know about flood risk and about the importance of flood insurance.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We appreciate it. This will be published on the Louisiana Realtors website by the end of this week.